The chapel smelled of white roses and lies. I stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than 6 months of rent, feeling the weight of 300 pairs of eyes burning into my spine like brands. The lace collar scratched against my throat. My fingers had gone numb around the bouquet of moonflowers, pale blue petals, that Desmond loved, not me. I'd never even liked them. Too fragile, too quick to wilt. But I'd chosen them anyway because that's what you did when you loved someone. You made yourself smaller, quieter. You picked their favorite flowers and pretended they were yours too. The afternoon light slanted through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's chapel painting, everything in shades of amber and crimson. It should have felt holy, sacred. Instead, it felt like standing in a beautiful cage while the door swung shut. Desmond stood across from me, and I watched his jaw clench so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His green eyes, once I'd thought them kind, hadn't I slid past my face, past my shoulder, landing somewhere in the front pew where his mother sat. Mrs. Fletcher's expression was carved from cold satisfaction, her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile, but close enough to cut. The priest's voice had faded to background noise, a distant hum like bees trapped behind glass. I could feel the moment coming the way you feel a storm building on a summer day, that electric tension in the air, that sense of inevitability. I can't do this. Desmond's words dropped into the perfumed silence like stones into still water. The ripples spread outward. The priest froze mid-gesture, his hands suspended in a blessing that would never land. Around us, 300 people inhaled as one hungry for the spectacle they'd somehow known was coming. They'd always known. I was the only fool who'd hoped otherwise. Desmond, his name cracked in my throat like old porcelain. I tried again, forcing strength into my voice that I didn't feel. What are you? I can't bind myself to this. He took a step backward, and the space between us became a canyon. To you, I won't tie myself to weakness. The word landed like a fist. Weakness. Not her. Not Coralie. Just weakness, as if that's all I'd ever been. All I'd ever be. My lungs stopped working. Some distant part of me had been holding its breath for weeks now. Months maybe since the night I'd overheard his beta telling him he was settling. Settling for the pale little baker with more heart than sense. The girl who cried at sunsets and stopped to help injured birds and believed foolishly that kindness was its own kind of strength. I was that girl. Pale hair that caught light like frost. Pale skin that flushed too easily, betraying every emotion, every wound. Too soft for a world that rewarded teeth and claws. You're not strong enough for this, Desmond continued, and there was something almost like relief in his voice. Like he'd been carrying a weight and had finally set it down, never mind that he was crushing me beneath it. For me, for what being my mate means, your pack needs a Luna who won't embarrass the Fletcher name, Mrs. Fletcher announced, rising from her seat like a queen addressing her court. Her silk dress rustled with vindication. Clearly this girl is not suitable for our bloodline. Girl, not woman, not wolf, just girl, like I was something half-formed, something incomplete. The chapel erupted then. Gasps and whispers crashed over me like a wave, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My fingers had gone white around the moonflowers, and I watched as petals began to drift to the marble floor, falling like my heart, like my foolish, stubborn hope. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to gather what remained of my dignity and flee. But my legs had turned to marble like the floor beneath me. I was a statue of my own shame built in a chapel that suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. Then the doors at the back of the chapel slammed open. The sound cracked through the chaos like thunder, and every voice cut off mid-syllable. Even Desmond went still, his rejection hovering unfinished in the air between us. The afternoon light streaming through those doors seemed to bend to concentrate to gather around the figure standing in the entrance, like he was pulling illumination toward himself through sheer force of will. I turned. We all turned, drawn by an authority that needed no announcement. He stood framed in the doorway, tall enough that he had to duck slightly beneath the arch. Broad-shouldered in a black coat that looked like it cost more than everything I owned combined. His hair was dark as midnight, pushed back from a face that was all sharp angles and brutal beauty, the kind of face that made you think of ancient kings and old violence, and power that didn't ask permission. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch in my chest. Silver. Not gray, not light blue, but silver like moonlight on snow, like mercury, like something not quite human. They swept across the assembled crowd with casual dominance, and I watched 300 wolves instinctively lower their gazes. Even Mrs. Fletcher's expression flickered, just for a moment, into something that might have been fear. I knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. Even I, sheltered and naive as Desmond had always claimed, recognized the man who ruled the Northern Territories with a reputation built on iron and blood, and whispered stories that kept pack mothers awake at night. Theron Silvercrest, the Lycan King. They said he'd killed his own father to claim the throne. They said he could shift mid-battle faster than thought, that he'd once destroyed an entire rival pack in a single night. They said he was a monster who had turned his back on every tradition, who ruled alone and trusted no one, and kept his heart locked behind walls even other alphas couldn't breach. He moved down the aisle with the fluid grace of a predator who'd never known fear, and the assembled wolves parted before him like grass before a scythe. His boots echoed on marble, each step a declaration. When he reached the altar, he didn't even glance at Desmond. He looked at me. That penetrating gaze swept over my face, and I felt stripped bare. Like he could see every secret I'd ever kept, every tear I'd swallowed, every moment I'd convinced myself I was enough when everyone else said I wasn't. The air between us crackled with something I didn't understand, something that made my skin prickle, and my wolf quiet, gentle thing that she was raise her head for the first time in months. "You're refusing her." It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, textured like smoke, an expensive whiskey, and it rolled through the chapel with an undertone of something dangerous. Desmond found his courage, though it came out defensive. Petulant. "This is pack business. No concern of yours, Your Majesty." He said the title like it was an insult, and I watched Theron's mouth curve into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'm making it my concern." He took another step closer, and I caught his scent. Pine and snow and something darker, like the moment before a storm breaks. "You stand here in front of your pack, your family, your bomb, and you reject your chosen mate because she's—" He paused, those mercury eyes flicking to me again, holding for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. What was the word? Weak. My face burned. Hearing it repeated, hearing it confirmed by this stranger who commanded rooms with his presence alone, made the shame fresh again. Raw. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to explain that I wasn't weak, just different, gentler, that I felt things deeply, too deeply, Desmond had said more than once, and that I believed foolishly that compassion was its own kind of power. "She's not suited for," Desmond started. "For you," Theron interrupted, and now there was an edge in his voice sharp enough to draw blood. "Yes, I heard, so let me ask you this, puppy." The insult landed like a slap, and Desmond's face flushed red. "If she's not suited for you, if you're so eager to cast her aside like trash, then why should she remain unclaimed?" The chapel had gone silent again, but this was a different silence. Anticipatory, dangerous. The kind of silence that precedes violence or revelation, or both. "What are you saying?" Desmond's voice had gone thin. Theron turned to face me fully, and the world narrowed to just the two of us standing in this chapel full of witnesses. He was so close I could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, could feel the heat radiating from his body like he ran several degrees hotter than normal wolves. "I'm saying," he spoke to me now, and the rest of the room ceased to exist, "if he doesn't want you, then you're wasted on him anyway." He extended one hand, palm up. An offering, a choice. "Be mine instead." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at his hand, large, scarred across the knuckles, capable of terrible violence, if the stories were true. My mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. Men like Theron Silvercrest didn't claim women like me. He could have anyone. Powerful females from ancient bloodlines. Warriors who could match him claw for claw. Women who commanded respect with a single glance. Why would he want someone Desmond had just declared too weak to... My voice came out, barely a whisper. "You don't even know me." Something shifted in his expression, not quite amusement, but close. "I know enough." His hand remained steady, unwavering. "I know you're standing here with your head held high when most would have run by now. I know you haven't shed a single tear, though I can see them building behind your eyes like a storm. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I know what it's like to be deemed insufficient by people who wouldn't recognize true strength if it bit them. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was insane. This was a fever dream brought on by humiliation and shock. And yet his hand was still extended, and Desmond was sputtering protests, and his mother looked like she'd swallowed glass, and 300 people were watching me make a choice that would define the rest of my life. I thought about going home, back to my tiny apartment above Rosemary's Bakery, where I'd spent 3 years kneading dough and pretending I was building towards something. About the pitying looks I'd received for weeks, months, maybe forever. About being that girl who wasn't enough for Desmond Fletcher, who everyone had questioned from the beginning. About being alone again, but this time carrying the weight of public rejection like a brand on my skin. Or I could take the hand of a king and step into complete unknown. My fingers moved before my brain fully processed the decision. They were shaking, I couldn't stop them, but they closed around his, and his hand was warm and solid and impossibly real. Okay, I breathed. Theron's fingers tightened around mine just slightly, and then he was turning to face the chapel. Turning to face Desmond, whose expression had gone from shocked to furious in the span of a heartbeat. You can't just, Desmond started forward. She's your what? Theron's free hand came up in a gesture that froze Desmond mid-step. Your rejected mate, your discarded choice. His voice carried to every corner of the chapel, rich with disdain. You gave up any claim when you humiliated her in front of witnesses. She's free to choose her own path now. He glanced at the priest, who looked like he might faint. Unless your pack law has changed since I last checked. The priest swallowed hard. No, your majesty, a public rejection. He looked at me with something between pity and awe. It breaks the bond. She's unclaimed. Not anymore. Theron's thumb brushed across my knuckles, and I felt that touch ripple through my entire body. She's mine. And anyone who has a problem with that. His moon-colored gaze swept the crowd, landing on Mrs. Fletcher with particular weight. Can take it up with me personally. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, brittle and sweet and ready to snap. Then Theron was leading me down the aisle, past rows of shocked faces, past Desmond, who stood frozen at the altar like a monument to his own stupidity, past the open doors and into the afternoon sunlight that felt like being born into a completely different world. A black car waited at the curb, sleek and expensive with tinted windows that reflected my pale, stunned face back at me. A driver in a dark suit opened the back door without a word, his expression carefully neutral. I hesitated at the threshold between my old life and whatever came next. The weight of the wedding dress suddenly felt unbearable. Too white, too heavy, too much like a costume I'd worn for a part I'd never been meant to play. Theron leaned close and his breath stirred the loose strands of hair at my temple. Having second thoughts. I'm having all the thoughts, I admitted. Then, surprising myself, I added, are you? That earned me a sound that might have been a laugh if it had come from someone who laughed more often. No, Hishan. He waited while I gathered my ridiculous dress and climbed into the car, then slid in beside me. I don't make decisions I haven't thought through. The door closed, the driver got in, and as we pulled away from St. Michael's Chapel, from Desmond, from humiliation, from everything I'd thought my life would be, I realized I was still holding Theron's hand, and he hadn't let go either. The drive stretched into silence, punctuated only by the purr of the engine and the occasional crackle of the driver's radio. I watched the familiar streets of Crescent Valley blur past the tinted windows, the bakery where I'd spent my mornings for 3 years arriving before dawn to start the first loaves. The park where I'd walked every evening trying to convince myself I was excited about the wedding, that the knot in my stomach was anticipation rather than dread. The apartment building where I'd packed my entire life into 3 suitcases because Desmond said we'd be moving into the Fletcher estate after the ceremony. His estate, his family, his pack. I'd never quite belonged there, not really. They'd made that clear enough without words, through sideways glances and conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. All of it falling away now like pages torn from a book I'd never finished reading. My hand was still in Theron's. I tried to pull away once, about 5 minutes into the drive, but his fingers had tightened just enough to keep me there. Not painful, not demanding, just steady like an anchor in a storm I hadn't realized I was drowning in until someone threw me a line. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded strange in the leather-scented quiet of the car. "My territory." He was looking out his own window profile, sharp as cut glass against the afternoon light. "Northern Mountains. Cascade Range. About 3 hours from here." 3 hours. Another world. I'd never been outside pack boundaries except for one disastrous trip to a neighboring territory for a funeral when I was 12. Desmond had always said there was no need to travel, that everything we needed was right here in Crescent Valley. That his pack was enough. His pack, not mine. I'd never quite fit the mold they'd wanted me to fill. My parents had died when I was 16. A car accident on a rain-slicked road, sudden and senseless and final. I'd been shuffled between distant relatives after that, passed around like an unwanted package until I'd aged out of their obligation and found the apartment above the bakery. When Desmond had shown interest in me 2 years ago, everyone treated it like I'd won some kind of lottery. Fletcher bloodline, strong genetics, good provider, stable future. No one had asked if I loved him. I'm not sure I'd known how to answer if they had. "Do you always make a habit of claiming strange women at weddings?" The question escaped before I could stop it, and I immediately wished I could swallow it back. But Theron's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No," he said simply. "First time." "Why?" I turned to look at him fully now, studying the hard lines of his face, searching for deception or mockery or whatever game powerful men played with girls like me. "You don't know anything about me." I could be exactly what Desmond said. Weak. Useless. A burden. Could be. He shifted to meet my gaze, and that pale, penetrating look held me pinned like a butterfly to cork. "Are you—" I don't know anymore. The honesty hurt coming out. I thought I knew who I was, but maybe he was right. Maybe I am too soft for this world. Soft isn't the same as weak. Theron's free hand came up, and for a moment I thought he might touch my face, but instead he gestured vaguely toward the chapel we'd left behind. That back there, standing in front of a hostile crowd while someone you trusted tears you apart, most wolves would have shifted and attacked or run crying. You did neither. His hand squeezed mine once. "That's not weakness." "I wanted to run," I whispered. "But you didn't." His voice carried absolute certainty. "That's what matters." I folded my hands in my lap after he finally released me, felt the unfamiliar weight of the engagement ring Desmond had given me 6 months ago. A princess-cut diamond that had cost him more than he wanted to spend, he'd told me later, but his mother insisted it needed to look appropriate for a Fletcher mate. I should take it off, should throw it out the window, or leave it on the car seat as some final symbol of closure. But my fingers wouldn't cooperate, and after a moment I just twisted it nervously around and around. "You'll meet the pack tonight," Theron said, and there was something different in his voice now, almost like warning. "They're not like what you're used to. Lycans are. We're different from standard wolf packs. Older bloodlines, more traditional in some ways, less in others." He paused. "They'll test you." My stomach clenched. "Test me how?" "Questions, challenges. They'll want to know what you are, why I claimed you, whether you're worth their loyalty." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was describing the weather rather than my upcoming trial by fire. "That's not terrifying at all," I muttered. This time he definitely smiled, a brief flash of white teeth that transformed his face from merely handsome to something almost devastating. "You'll survive it," he said with odd certainty. "You survived today." The landscape began to change as we drove north. The neat suburban sprawl of Crescent Valley gave way to wilder country. Dense forests that crowded the road like they were trying to reclaim the asphalt. Mountains rising in the distance like the spine of some sleeping giant, still topped with snow even though it was late spring. The air felt different here, cleaner somehow, carrying scents of pine and stone and winter even in May. We passed through two small towns, barely more than crossroads, with a gas station and a diner, then turned onto a private road marked only by a subtle sign carved into weathered wood. Silvercrest territory, private property. The pavement became gravel, then dirt, winding up through the forest in switchbacks that made my stomach lurch. The trees here were ancient, thick-trunked giants that blocked out the sun and cast everything in perpetual twilight. I caught glimpses of movement in the shadows. Wolves running parallel to the car, keeping pace watching. "How much land do you have?" I asked, watching the forest thicken into something primordial and untouched. "Enough." He didn't elaborate and I didn't push. Desmond had always hated when I asked too many questions, said it was annoying that I should just trust him to tell me what I needed to know. The memory stung, so I pushed it away and focused on the scenery instead. Finally, after what felt like climbing into the clouds themselves, the forest opened into a clearing, and I forgot to breathe. The estate sprawled before us like something from a dream or a period film. Stone and timber construction built into the mountainside itself with wings extending in graceful arcs that seemed to grow from the rock rather than sitting on top of it. Windows caught the late afternoon sun like captured fire. Everything about it spoke of power and permanence and belonging to this place in a way that went back centuries. "This is your home," I said, unable to keep the awe from my voice. "Our home," Theron corrected quietly. "As of today." The driver pulled up to the main entrance where a cluster of people waited. Not servants, I could tell that immediately from the way they carry themselves. Pack members, warriors probably, based on the scars visible on exposed skin and the way they tracked our car with predatory focus. My hands started shaking again. Theron noticed. Of course he noticed. "Breathe," he said low enough that only I could hear. "You're not prey here, you're with me. That means something." What does it mean? I needed to know. Needed some kind of framework to understand what I'd agreed to. He considered the question while the driver opened his door. "It means you're protected. It means any disrespect toward you is disrespect toward me. It means—" He paused, emotion flickering across his features, too fast to read. "It means you belong here even if you don't believe it yet." Then he was out of the car and extending his hand to help me navigate the ridiculous dress. I took it, felt his strength as he basically lifted me out, and then I was standing on gravel in a wedding gown facing a group of lichens who looked at me like I was an interesting but potentially dangerous puzzle. "My pack," Theron said, his hand settling on the small of my back, claiming. "This is Evander, my second." He indicated a man who looked to be in his late 30s with dark skin and silver threading through his short hair. His eyes assessed me with uncomfortable intensity, weighing and measuring and finding me wanting, probably. "Your Majesty," Evander's voice was deep as a drum. Then his gaze shifted to me and I saw the question there, even before he voiced it. "And this is Coralie Ashenlake," Theron said, and the words landed like a declaration of war. "My mate." The assembled lichens couldn't hide their shock. A woman with red hair braided down her back actually took a step forward, her expression somewhere between disbelief and anger, then caught herself. "Your Majesty," she said, and her voice carried an edge. "Surely this is very sudden." "Isolde," Theron's voice carried a note of warning. "I don't recall asking for input." The woman Isolde pressed her lips together, but she didn't retreat. "Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive me." Her ice-blue eyes found mine, and there was something sharp in them. Not quite hostility, but close. Definitely judgment. "Welcome to Silvercrest territory." It didn't sound like a welcome. "Thank you," I managed, though my voice came out smaller than I wanted. Theron's hand pressed more firmly against my back, and I drew strength from the contact. "This is Jackson," Theron continued, indicating a younger man with shaggy brown hair and a crooked smile that looked more genuine than the others. "He runs security." The man nodded at me, and I caught something like sympathy in his expression. "Next to him is Sienna. She manages the household." A tall, blonde woman with sharp features gave me a measuring look that revealed nothing. "And that," Theron gestured to Isolde, who was still watching me with those calculating eyes, "is my advisor." Something in the pause before advisor made me think the woman was more than that, or had been once. The tension between her and Theron was palpable, built from years of something I couldn't name. "We should get you settled," Theron said, already steering me toward the entrance. "It's been a long day." That was an understatement so massive, it would have been funny if I had any energy left for humor. The inside of the estate matched the outside, all stone and warm wood and windows that framed mountain views like living paintings. But I barely processed the beauty, because I was too busy trying not to trip over my dress, while 6 lichens followed us with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Theron led me up a wide staircase down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-looking men and women who all shared his sharp features, and finally to a door at the end of the corridor. He opened it, gestured me inside, and I stepped into a room that was easily the size of my entire apartment. A four-poster bed dominated the space, covered in deep blue linens that looked soft enough to drown in. Windows on two walls offered views of the forest and mountains. A fireplace stood ready to be lit. Everything was elegant without being fussy, comfortable without being casual. "This is your room," Theron said from the doorway. He hadn't followed me in, I realized. "Mine is across the hall if you need anything. Bathroom through there." He pointed to a door on the left. "Closet there. Sienna will bring you something to change into. We'll have dinner in an hour. Just the inner circle tonight. Tomorrow." He trailed off, running a hand through his dark hair in the first gesture I'd seen that suggested he might be anything other than perfectly controlled. "Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." The rest? I turned to face him, this stranger who'd claimed me as his mate in front of a chapel full of witnesses. "What is the rest?" Those mercury eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something raw there. Something that looked almost like loneliness wrapped in layers of authority and distance. "Everything," he said quietly. "What this means, what you want, what I—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "Get some rest. We'll talk at dinner." Then he was gone, door closing behind him with a soft click, and I was alone in a room bigger than my dreams, wearing a wedding dress bought for a marriage that never happened, claimed by a king I didn't know. I made it to the bed before my legs gave out. I sat on the edge of that enormous bed, still in the wedding dress, and felt the full weight of the day finally crash down on me. My ribs hurt from the tight corset. My feet ached in shoes I'd never wanted. And my chest felt like someone had hollowed it out with a dull spoon, leaving nothing but raw edges and the echo of Desmond's words. Too weak. Too soft. Not strong enough. A knock on the door made me jump. "Come in," I called, expecting Sienna with clothes. But it was Jackson who entered, carrying a tray with a teapot and cup. That crooked smile was still in place, warmer than the reception I'd gotten from the others. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Chamomile, good for shock." "Thank you." I meant it. The simple kindness felt like water in a desert. He studied me for a moment, head tilted. "You know, in the 3 years I've been here, I've never seen him do anything remotely like what he did today." "Is that supposed to make me feel better or worse?" I asked. Jackson's grin widened. "Better, I think. Theron doesn't make impulsive decisions. If he claimed you, he had a reason." "What reason could possibly, for what it's worth," he interrupted, suddenly serious. "I think you're braver than you know. Most people would have fallen apart back there in that chapel. You held your ground. I didn't have much choice." "We always have choices," he said, moving toward the door. "You chose to take his hand. That took courage." After he left, I poured the tea with shaking hands and drank it too hot, letting it burn all the way down. Through the window, I could see the sun beginning to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in this enormous house, Theron was probably dealing with a pack full of questions about the pale-haired girl he'd claimed on what looked like a whim. Somewhere back in Crescent Valley, Desmond was probably celebrating his narrow escape from binding himself to someone too weak for his perfect bloodline. And here I sat in a wedding dress I'd never wear again, in a house I didn't belong in, claimed by a king for reasons I couldn't begin to understand. The worst part, some small treacherous part of me was glad I'd taken his hand. The dress came off in pieces. Sienna arrived 20 minutes after Jackson left, carrying an armful of clothes and wearing an expression that gave nothing away. She helped me out of the elaborate gown without comment, her movements efficient and impersonal, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Maybe she had. Maybe Theron brought home strays regularly, and Sienna was the one who civilized them. The thought made my chest tight. She left me with soft gray artes, a cream sweater that looked expensive in simple flats. "Dinner is at 7, she said, pausing at the door. "Someone will come fetch you." Then, with the barest softening around her eyes, "The bathroom has everything you need. Take your time." The bathroom was marble and glass, with a shower that had more settings than seemed strictly necessary. I stood underwater, hot enough to turn my skin pink, washing away the chapel's perfume, the weight of expectations, the feeling of Desmond's eyes sliding past me like I was something to step around rather than see. When I finally emerged wrapped in a towel that was probably worth more than my monthly rent had been, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Steam clouded the edges, but I could still see her. The girl with pale blonde hair darkened by water, skin flushed from heat, eyes too large in a face that looked younger than 24. Fragile Desmond's mother had called me once with a sneer that made it clear she didn't mean delicate in any positive sense. I touched the mirror, felt the cold glass beneath my fingertips. "Who are you?" I whispered to my reflection. She didn't answer. I dressed in the clothes Sienna had left, ran a comb through my hair until it fell in damp waves past my shoulders, and tried to prepare myself for dinner with a pack of lichens who had every reason to see me as an intruder, an imposter, a mistake their king had made in a moment of whatever had possessed him in that chapel. By the time the knock came at 6:50, my stomach was twisted into knots that had nothing to do with hunger. It was Jackson again, still wearing that easy smile. "Ready?" "No," I admitted, "but I don't think waiting will make it better." Honest, I like that. He offered his arm like we were going to a party instead of what felt like a tribunal. "Fair warning, Isolde's going to push. She always does. And Kale." He made a face. "Well, you'll see." "Who's Kale?" "Another one of the inner circle. He's complicated." We walked down the hallway past those stern portraits that seemed to watch with disapproval. "What lines?" I asked, remembering what Jackson had said earlier. "You'll know if someone crosses them," he said cryptically. The dining room was smaller than I'd expected. Intimate even with a table that could seat maybe 12, but was currently set for 7. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and candles provided warm light that softened the room's edges. It should have felt welcoming. It didn't. Evander stood near the fire, arm crossed, watching our entrance with that same assessing gaze. Isolde sat at the table, fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the wood. Sienna moved between the kitchen and dining room with quiet efficiency. And there by the windows, with his back to us, stood another man I hadn't met yet. Tall, blonde, with shoulders that spoke of serious time in the training yard. Theron stood at the head of the table. He'd changed to dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories of violence survived. His hair was still damp, like he'd showered too. And when those pale eyes found me across the room, something in my chest squeezed tight. "Sit," he said, indicating the chair to his right. I crossed the room, feeling like every step was being judged. Wade found wanting. Jackson pulled out my chair with exaggerated chivalry that earned him an eye roll from Isolde, then took the seat beside me. Evander sat to Theron's left, with Isolde beside him. The blond man turned from the window, and I got my first clear look at his face. Cold gray eyes, a jaw so tight it looked painful, and an expression of such open hostility that I actually leaned back in my chair. "That's Kyle," Jackson murmured. "Told you, complicated." Kale took the seat next to Isolde without a word, his gaze never leaving me. It felt like being studied by something that was deciding whether you were prey or competition. Sienna served the first course soup that smelled like autumn and herbs, then retreated to the kitchen. For a moment, the only sound was spoons against bowls. The silence stretched, pulled taut, ready to snap. Then Isolde broke it like someone throwing a rock through glass. "So," she said, looking directly at me, "what pack are you from a Crescent Valley?" I kept my voice steady. "Southeast Oregon, Fletcher's pack." "Fletcher," Evander repeated, and there was a question in it. "Yes." No point denying what they already knew. "And he rejected you." Isolde's tone made it sound like a character flaw on my part. "At the altar, in front of witnesses." "Why, Isolde?" Theron's voice carried a warning. "It's a fair question," she shot back. "She shows up as your mate with no warning, no courtship, no pack alliance negotiations. We're entitled to understand the circumstances." "You're entitled to respect her," Theron countered, "or leave my table." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Isolde's jaw tightened, but she backed down, returning her attention to her soup with barely concealed frustration. Into the tense silence, I found myself speaking. "He said I was too weak." The words came out quieter than I intended, but I forced myself to continue. "Too soft. Not strong enough for what being his mate would mean." "And what did you say?" This from Isolde, her ice blue eyes fixed on me with unnerving intensity. "Nothing." I met her gaze refusing to look away first. What could I say? He'd already made up his mind. You could have fought back, Kale said, speaking for the first time. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. Challenged him, made him prove his claim. To what end? I set down my spoon, appetite gone, so I could bind myself to someone who thought I was inadequate, force him into a bond he didn't want. That's not strength. That's desperation. Evander made a sound that might have been approval. So you let him walk away, Isolde said. I let him make his choice. I twisted the engagement ring still on my finger, I realized with a jolt. Why hadn't I taken it off and then I made mine? By accepting the first alternative that presented itself. Isolde's tone was neutral, but the implication cut. How was that any less desperate? My face heated, but before I could formulate a response, Theron's hand came down on the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. Enough, his voice carried absolute authority, the kind that made even Isolde pause. She's been through hell today. She's here as my mate under my protection, and I won't have her interrogated at her first meal. We're just trying to understand, Isolde started. Then ask me, Theron interrupted. Not her, me. The room went silent again, but this silence felt different. Like everyone was recalculating, reassessing what my presence meant, not just for the pack, but for their king who was defending me with unusual ferocity. Jackson, bless him, broke the tension with a complete subject change. So, Corley, do you work? Have any special skills we should know about? I could have kissed him for the lifeline. I'm a baker, I said, grateful for solid ground. Or I was. I worked mornings at Rosemary's Bakery in Crescent Valley. Breads mostly, some pastries. A baker. Jackson's grin was genuine. That's perfect. Our kitchen could use someone who actually knows what they're doing. No offense, Sienna, he called toward the kitchen. Much offense taken, Sienna called back, but there was humor in it. What about training, Evander asked. Combat strategy. I shook my head. Basic defense only. I was never meant to be a fighter. Then what were you meant to be? Isolde asked, and this time there was genuine curiosity rather than judgment in the question. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know, I admitted. Desmond and I never talked about it. I thought being his mate would be enough, that I'd find my place naturally. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Clearly I was wrong. Ora, Theron said quietly, and everyone turned to look at him. You were with the wrong person to find it. Our eyes met across the table and something passed between us. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Like he knew what it felt like to be defined by others' expectations. To wonder if you'd ever be enough. The moment stretched, then broke when Sienna emerged with the main course. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Pack business. Territorial disputes with a neighboring clan. Preparations for the summer solstice gathering. I listened more than I spoke, learning the rhythms of this new world. The way Evander and Theron communicated in shorthand built from years of trust. The way Isolde challenged every decision but ultimately deferred. The way KL watched everything with those cold gray eyes and Jackson kept the mood light, with terrible jokes that made even Evander crack a smile. By the time dessert arrived, berry tart that made me ache with memories of my own kitchen. I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. It was the exhaustion of maintaining composure, of being on display, of trying to prove something to people who had already decided what they thought of me. You should rest, Theron said, clearly reading my fatigue. Tomorrow will be busy. The full pack gathers for evening meal, and they'll want to meet you. My stomach dropped. If this dinner with 6 people had been difficult, how would I survive a room full of lichens? As if reading my thoughts, Jackson leaned over. Don't worry, he murmured. I'll run interference. And the younger pack members are way more chill than this lot. I heard that, Isolde said. You were meant to, Jackson shot back cheerfully. I stood ready to escape to the sanctuary of my room when Theron rose too. I'll walk you back. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. We left the dining room together, and I felt the weight of 4 pairs of eyes watching our departure. The hallway felt cooler, quieter, intimate, in a way that made me hyper-aware of Theron walking beside me, close enough that our arms occasionally brushed, close enough that I could smell pine and snow and that darker scent like storms gathering. They're protective, he said after a moment, of the pack, of me. of the order we've built here. New variables make them nervous. I'm a variable, I said, not a question. A significant one. We'd reached my door and he stopped turning to face me in the dim hallway. This close I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. The way his jaw was shadowed with stubble. The scar through his eyebrow that gave his face character. They need time, he continued, to adjust, to see that you're not a threat. Am I asked. A threat? His expression shifted, something almost like surprise flickering across his features. To what? I don't know. I gestured helplessly. Whatever balance you have here. Whatever life you'd built before I trailed off, not sure how to finish. Before today, Theron supplied quietly. He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face in the low light. The life I'd built was stable, controlled, safe. He reached up and I thought he might touch my face, but instead, his hand settled on the doorframe beside my head, caging me without trapping me. But it was also empty, and I didn't realize how empty until I walked into that chapel and saw you standing there in a dress meant for someone else, looking like you were about to break, but refusing to. My breath caught. Why did you do it? I needed to hear it again. Needed the reassurance. Really. He stopped jaw working like he was fighting with himself over how much to reveal. Because I saw something in you that I recognized. Something I thought I'd lost. Those moon-colored eyes locked with mine. And I thought maybe we could both be less alone. The honesty of it struck me like a physical blow. This powerful king, this man who commanded respect with his presence alone, admitting to loneliness, to emptiness, to seeing in me of all people something worth claiming. I'm still wearing his ring, I blurted out, then immediately wanted to kick myself for the non sequitur. But Theron just glanced down at my hand at the diamond that caught the hallway light. So take it off. I can't. I twisted it around and around. My fingers are swollen from everything. The heat, stress, and it won't. I pulled at it uselessly. It won't come off. He caught my hand, held it steady. His touch was warm, careful, and I felt my pulse jump at the contact. May I? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Theron worked the ring gently, twisting it slowly, patiently, until finally it slid free. He held it up between us, this symbol of a life I'd never have, and for a moment I thought he might throw it away or crush it or something dramatic. Instead, he just placed it in my palm and closed my fingers around it. Keep it or throw it away, he said, but the choice is yours, not his, not mine, yours. Then he was gone, crossing the hallway to his own room, and I was left standing in my doorway holding a ring that suddenly weighed nothing at all. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of pure panic before memory crashed back. The chapel. The rejection. Theron's hand extended like a lifeline. The ring sat on the bedside table where I'd left it last night, and in the morning light it looked smaller, somehow. Less significant. I picked it up, felt its weight one last time, then dropped it in the drawer and shut it away. A knock on the door made me jump. Come in, I called, pulling the blanket up, even though I was fully dressed in the soft pajamas Sienna had left folded on a chair. It was Jackson carrying a breakfast tray and looking far too cheerful for whatever ungodly hour it was. Morning sunshine, Theron thought you might want to eat before facing the masses. What time is it? My voice came out rough with sleep. Just past 9, you slept hard, didn't even hear the morning training runs. He set the tray on the desk by the window. There's a PAC meeting at noon, General Assembly, everyone who's not on patrol duty. They'll want to see you hear from Theron, probably gossip about you the second you leave the room. My stomach clenched. That's terrifying. Yeah, probably. Jackson's honesty was almost refreshing. But you've got 3 hours to prepare, and I've been sent to give you the unofficial guide to not pissing off a room full of lichens. Despite my nerves, I smiled. There's an official guide. Sure, it's called Don't Make Eye Contact, Don't Show Weakness, and Definitely Don't Bleed. But that one's terrible advice, so I made my own. He settled into the chair across from me while I picked at the food. Eggs, toast, fruit that tasted like it had been picked this morning. First rule, he said, be yourself. I know that sounds like greeting card nonsense, but lichens can smell fake from a mile away. They're already suspicious. Trying to be something you're not will just make it worse. What if being myself isn't impressive enough? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Jackson's expression softened. Then they'll deal with it. You're not here to audition for their approval. Theron claimed you. That means something whether they like it or not. But what does it mean? I set down my fork, appetite gone. I keep asking, and no one gives me a real answer. He was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. In like culture, a mate claim isn't just romantic. It's political, social, spiritual. When the king claims someone, he's saying, this person is my equal, my partner, my chosen family. It means you have power here, whether you know how to use it yet or not. Power. The word felt foreign on my tongue, like trying on clothes that didn't fit. I'd never had power, not in my pack, not with Desmond, not anywhere. I'd been the quiet girl who baked bread and didn't make waves and believed that being kind was enough. I don't know how to be powerful, I admitted. Neither did Theron once. Jackson stood moving to the window. His father was not a good man, cruel, ruled through fear and violence. When Theron challenged him 3 years ago, everyone thought he'd either lose or become exactly like the old king. He turned back to me. But he didn't. He built something different here. Still strong, still respected, but not built on terror. He paused, and something in his expression made me pay closer attention. My point is, he continued, power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to become what people expect you to be. Before I could respond, another knock interrupted us. This time it was Sienna carrying the clothes draped over her arm. For the meeting, she said, laying them out on the bed. Nothing too formal, but you should look the part. The part of what I wanted to ask, but she was already gone. The clothes were beautiful. Dark green dress that fell to mid-calf, soft leather boots, a fitted jacket that somehow managed to look both elegant and practical. I dressed after Jackson left, braided my hair back from my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked the same as always. Pale hair, pale skin, features that were pleasant enough but not striking. Average height, average build. Nothing about me screamed queen or powerful or worth claiming. But maybe that was the point. Maybe I didn't need to be something I wasn't. The thought felt revolutionary and terrifying in equal measure. At 11:30, Theron came to collect me. He looked more formal than last night, black shirt, dark pants, boots that added to his already considerable height. His hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp architecture of his face, and that penetrating stare assessed me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You look good, he said simply. I look scared, I corrected. That too. His mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. But you'll be fine. Just stand beside me. Let me do most of the talking. And remember, he stepped closer and suddenly the hallway felt smaller, more intimate. You belong there. Do I? I needed to hear it again. Yes, he said, and there was no hesitation in his voice. You do. The Great Hall was exactly what it sounded like. A massive space with vaulted ceilings, exposed beams and windows that offered panoramic views of the mountains. But I barely noticed the architecture because I was too focused on the 100 or so lichens packed into the room, all of whom turned to stare as we entered. The silence was deafening. Theron's hands settled on the small of my back, steady and warm, and he guided me to the front of the room where a slightly raised platform gave us elevation over the crowd. Evander was already there along with Isolde and Kael. Jackson caught my eye from somewhere in the middle of the crowd and gave me a subtle thumbs up. Pack. Theron's voice carried effortlessly through the space, commanding attention without shouting. Thank you for gathering. I know many of you have questions about yesterday's events, and you deserve answers. The crowd shifted, murmured, but remained focused. Yesterday, I claimed a mate. His hand pressed more firmly against my back, a silent message to stay strong. Some of you will question this decision. Some of you already have. That's your right. He paused, letting the words settle. But understand this. She is mine to protect, mine to cherish, and mine to defend. Any disrespect toward her is disrespect toward me. A woman near the front raised her hand, middle-aged with gray-streaked brown hair and a face marked by old scars. Your Majesty, with all respect, we know nothing about her. Her pack allegiance, her bloodline, her abilities. How can we trust? You trust me, Theron interrupted, but not unkindly. The woman hesitated, then nodded. Of course, Your Majesty. I've led you for 3 years, protected this pack, expanded our territory, brought prosperity and peace. Have I given you reason to doubt my judgment? No, Your Majesty. Then extend that trust to this. He looked out over the assembled faces. Her name is Coralie Ashenlake. She comes from Crescent Valley Pack. She has no political connections, no powerful bloodline, no combat training worth mentioning. The blunt honesty made me flinch, but he continued. What she does have is courage, compassion, and a strength that isn't measured in how hard you can hit or how loud you can growl. Someone in the back called out, "What use is compassion in a fight?" More than you'd think, Theron replied. How many conflicts have we resolved through negotiation rather than violence? How many alliances have we built through understanding rather than intimidation? Strength isn't just physical. And if you can't see that, then you've learned nothing from the past 3 years. The crowd absorbed this in varying degrees of acceptance. I could see some nodding, others frowning, still others simply watching me with open curiosity. Then a young woman stepped forward, maybe 19 or 20, with short dark hair and nervous energy. Can she speak for herself? The question wasn't hostile, just genuinely curious. Or does she just stand there while you defend her? Every eye in the room turned to me. My mouth went dry. This was it, the moment where I either proved I had something to offer or confirmed every doubt they had. Theron's hand left my back, giving me space to step forward if I chose. I chose. I can speak, I said, and my voice only shook a little. And you're right to have questions. If I were you, I'd be suspicious too. I scanned the crowd, trying to make eye contact with as many people as possible. I didn't grow up preparing to be anyone's mate, let alone a king's. I'm not a warrior. I'm not politically connected. Yesterday morning, I thought I was getting married to someone else. I swallowed hard, and then everything changed. Why accept him? This from an older man with a beard down to his chest. You didn't know him. Could have walked away. Could I asked honestly. After being rejected in front of everyone I knew, humiliated, told I wasn't good enough, when someone offered me a way out, a chance to be something other than the girl who wasn't strong enough, I shook my head. Maybe I should have been more careful. Maybe I should have asked more questions. But in that moment, someone saw me as worth claiming when everyone else saw me as worth discarding. I took a breath, steadying myself. So yes, I took his hand, and I'll keep taking it for as long as he's willing to extend it. Because maybe my voice strengthened, maybe I'm tired of being told I'm not enough. The silence that followed felt different, less hostile, more contemplative. Then Jackson started clapping. Just him at first, slow and deliberate, until others joined in. Not everyone, but enough that the sound filled the hall and made my eyes sting with unexpected emotion. Theron stepped beside me again, close enough that our shoulders touched. Coralie will be learning our ways, he told the assembly. She'll train with our instructors, study our history, integrate into pack life. I expect you to give her the same respect you'd give any pack member. And in return, he glanced at me, she'll prove herself worthy of that. No pressure, I thought wildly, but I nodded anyway, because what else could I do? The meeting continued with pack business, territorial reports, supply concerns, requests for Theron's judgment on various disputes. I stood beside him through all of it, trying to project confidence I didn't feel, and gradually the crowd's attention shifted away from me and back to the normal rhythms of pack life. When it finally ended, when people began to disperse, I felt like I'd run a marathon, but I'd survived it, and somehow that felt like victory enough. 3 weeks passed in a blur of learning, adjustment, and small victories that felt monumental. The old bakehouse became my sanctuary. Theron had approved my request the morning after the assembly, arranging for supplies to be delivered and the ancient stone ovens to be inspected and repaired. I spent my mornings there, hands deep in dough, creating loaves that filled the compound with scents of rosemary and honey and home. Pack members started dropping by, tentatively at first, testing whether the new Luna was approachable or another untouchable figure to fear. A young woman named Briar came regularly, chattering about her tracking assignments while stealing warm rolls. Thomas and Maria, an elder couple with gentle eyes, brought me herbs from their garden, and shared stories about the pack's history back before Theron's father had turned everything dark. Even Jackson stopped by most afternoons claiming he needed quality control, but really just wanting company while he pretended to work on security reports. The afternoons were harder. Evander had insisted I needed at least basic self-defense training, and I spent 3 hours every day in the training grounds getting systematically destroyed by various pack members who were genuinely trying to teach me how not to die if someone attacked. I was terrible at it, slow, hesitant, too afraid of hurting someone to commit to strikes. My body didn't move like a warrior's, it moved like a baker's, used to gentle kneading and careful measurements, not violence. But I kept showing up, kept trying, kept earning bruises that Theron would notice each evening with a tightening jaw and careful fingers checking for serious injury. "You don't have to do this," he'd said one night after a particularly brutal session left me limping. "Yes, I do," I'd replied, meeting those pale eyes. "Everyone needs to see I'm trying." And I was trying to learn pack hierarchy, trying to understand Lycan customs, trying to carve out a place for myself that felt authentic rather than forced. Some days were better than others. Some days I felt almost like I belonged, laughing with Briar over burned bread, discussing philosophy with the pack's librarian while he recommended books. Other days I caught whispers that cut deep. Still wearing training wheels. Queen in name only. How long until he realizes his mistake? But Theron never wavered. He sat beside me at every meal, walked with me through the compound, discussed pack business, and asked my opinion even when I had nothing useful to offer. At night, we'd retreat to our separate rooms, but often he'd knock on my door and we'd sit on my balcony talking until the stars came out. About everything. About nothing. His childhood under a tyrant father who'd beaten the gentleness out of everyone around him. My parents' death and the loneliness that followed being passed between relatives who saw me as obligation rather than family. Dreams we'd given up on, fears we couldn't shake. We were learning each other slowly, carefully building something neither of us had names for yet. But there were complications. Isolde watched our growing closeness with increasing tension, and I finally asked Jackson about her one morning while hauling flour sacks. "They were never mates," he explained, pausing to catch his breath. "But there was something. Years ago, before Theron challenged his father, she wanted more than he could give. And when he became king, she thought maybe." He shrugged. "But he never claimed her, never even considered it from what Evander says." "Does she hate me?" I asked quietly. "No." Jackson thought about it. "I think she's just confused. She spent years being the woman closest to him, and now you've appeared out of nowhere and he looks at you like—" He stopped himself. "Like what?" "Like your heir and he's been drowning." The words stayed with me, warm and terrifying in equal measure. Then there was Kael, whose hostility had only grown. He never openly challenged Theron. He wasn't stupid enough for that, but he made his disdain for me clear through small cuts, questioning my suggestions in the few meetings I attended, making jokes about soft lunas within earshot. Once even accidentally knocking into me hard enough to send me sprawling in the training yard, my palms scraping against gravel. Theron had grabbed him by the throat so fast I hadn't seen him move. "Touch her again," he'd said, voice arctic, "and you'll learn exactly how far my patience extends." Kael had backed down, but the hatred in his gray eyes promised the conflict wasn't over. 4 weeks in, on a cool evening with autumn beginning to creep into the mountain air, everything changed. I was in the bakehouse pulling the last loaves from the oven when Briar burst through the door. Her face was pale, eyes wide with something close to panic. "Coralie, you need to come now." The urgency in her voice sent ice through my veins. "What happened?" "Southern border. Scouts reported rogues moving through the territory, at least 20. They're not responding to warnings, and Theron's taking a force to intercept." She was already pulling me toward the door. "He wants you in the main house with Sienna and the others who aren't fighting." My stomach dropped. "How dangerous is this?" Briar's expression answered before her words did. "Rogues are unpredictable. Usually they avoid packed territory, but a group this size—" She swallowed. "They're either desperate or organized. Either way, it's bad." The main house was controlled chaos. Lycans in various stages of preparing for battle, checking weapons, stripping down for shifting, receiving orders from Evander, who stood at the center like the eye of a storm. I spotted Theron near the door buckling a knife harness across his chest, and before I could think better of it, I was pushing through the crowd to reach him. He looked up as I approached, and something in his expression softened despite the tension radiating from every line of his body. "You should be inside," he said. "I know. Briar told me." I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I wrapped them around myself. "How long will you be gone?" "However long it takes." He finished with the harness, checked that the blade sat properly. "Evander's staying to coordinate defense. If anything breaks through, you'll be safe." "I'm not worried about me." The words came out before I could stop them, raw and honest. Those mercury eyes held mine, and for a moment the chaos around us faded. He reached up, cupped my face with one large hand thumb, brushing across my cheekbone. The touch sent heat through me, despite the fear coiling in my gut. "I will," he promised. "Come back." Then he did something he'd never done before. Leaned down and pressed his forehead to my just for a breath, sharing warmth and certainty, and something that felt terrifyingly close to need. Then he was gone, leading 24 lichens toward the forest at a run that became a blur of shifted forms in predatory grace. The waiting was agony. Evander organized the remaining pack members into defensive positions. Sienna brought everyone inside locked doors, prepared the healing center with an efficiency that spoke of too much practice. I stood at the window of the great hall watching the tree line, counting minutes that felt like hours. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, in the way my chest felt too tight, in the prickle at the base of my skull that wouldn't go away. "He'll be fine." Isolde's voice came from beside me. I hadn't heard her approach. "Theron survived worse than rogues." "You care about him," I said. Not a question. "I care about the pack," she corrected, but there was something in her voice. "Theron is the pack." A pause. Though I'll admit I didn't think he'd ever let anyone close enough to matter. Not after everything with his father. I glanced at her, surprised by the almost confession. "What happened with his father?" Isolde was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then the old king was brutal, ruled through fear, broke anyone who challenged him. Theron grew up watching his mother wither under that cruelty until she just gave up, died when he was 16, and everyone said it was illness, but Theron knew better. She stared out at the darkening forest. He swore he'd never be like his father, never claim a mate he couldn't cherish, never build a rule on breaking others. So he stayed alone, stayed careful. "Until me," I whispered. "Until you," she agreed. "And I think—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I think he saw something in you that he recognized. The parts of himself he worked so hard to hide from everyone else." Before I could process that, a howl split the night. Close, too close, and wrong, not the victory song of returning warriors, but a warning cry that made every lichen in the room tense. "They're coming back," Evander said, already moving toward the door. "Fast. Something's wrong." We poured outside into the courtyard just as shapes burst from the tree line. Lichens in both human and wolf form, some carrying injured packmates, all moving with urgent speed that spoke of pursuit rather than victory. I scanned desperately for Theron, counting faces trying to there. In human form, supporting Jackson, who was limping badly, blood streaming from a gash across his shoulder. Alive. Whole. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. But behind them, more shapes emerged from the forest. Not packmates. Rogues. Wild-eyed, matted fur, moving with the erratic aggression of wolves who'd lost all connection to humanity. At least 10 of them, and they were closing fast. "Inside!" Evander roared. "Everyone inside now!" Chaos erupted, pack members scrambling for the house, warriors turning to form a defensive line, rogues crashing into them with snapping jaws and slashing claws. I stood frozen, watching Theron push Jackson towards safety before spinning to face a massive rogue bearing down on him. He shifted mid-turn faster than thought, becoming a wolf larger than any I'd seen, black as midnight, with those same pale eyes. He met the rogue's charge with devastating force, jaws closing around its throat, bringing it down hard. But there were too many. Even as Theron fought, even as Evander and the others formed a barrier, I could see rogues slipping through, heading for the house where non-combatants were still scrambling inside, heading for Briar, who'd tripped on the stairs. I didn't think. Thinking would have meant recognizing my complete lack of training, my weakness, my inadequacy. Thinking would have meant freezing. So I didn't think. I just ran, putting myself between Briar and the rogue that was seconds from reaching her. It slammed into me with the force of a moving car. Pain exploded across my ribs as claws found purchase tearing through fabric and skin. I went down hard on stone that scraped skin from my palms, and for a moment everything went white with agony. Hot breath in my face, yellow eyes devoid of reason or mercy, jaws opening for a killing strike. Then something hit the rogue from the side with enough force to tear it completely away from me. A massive black wolf Theron, his movements brutal and protective and absolutely lethal. He killed the rogue quickly, efficiently, then shifted back to human in that impossible fluid motion. Coralie, his hands were on me checking for wounds, and his face was granite with terror and rage. What were you thinking? Briar, I managed, though my ribs screamed. She was going to, I don't care. The words came out harsh, almost desperate. Blood covered him, some his mostly not, and those pale eyes were wild. You don't do that. You don't risk yourself when you can't defend. He cut himself off, jaw working, then pulled me against his chest so hard I gasped. The embrace was crushing, desperate, like he needed to prove I was real and whole in his. Don't, he said into my hair. Not ever again. Around us the fighting was ending. The remaining rogues were either dead or fleeing back into the forest, chased by pack warriors. Evander was calling for status reports. Dr. Winters, the pack healer, was already moving among the wounded, triaging injuries with practice efficiency. But Theron was still holding me like I might disappear, and I could feel his heart hammering against my cheek, could feel the tremor running through his powerful frame. I'm okay, I whispered. I'm okay. Oh, you're hurt. He pulled back just enough to examine the claw marks across my side. They were painful but shallow, already clotting. I need you to breathe, I said, reaching up to cup his face the way he'd done to me earlier. I'm here. I'm alive. Briar's safe. We're okay. Those mercury eyes searched mine, looking for lies, for damage beyond the physical. Then he was kissing me, fierce and desperate, and claiming like he needed to prove I was real. I kissed him back, and with equal desperation, tasting blood and fear and relief, feeling 4 weeks of careful distance shatter into something raw and necessary. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the entire pack was staring at us. Well, Jackson said from where Dr. Winters was stitching his shoulder, grinning and despite the pain, guess we don't have to wonder about the mate bond anymore. Theron huffed something that might have been a laugh, pressed his forehead to mine again, that gesture becoming ours, becoming ritual. Inside, he said, let's get you patched up. Then we're having a very long conversation about self-preservation. Looking forward to it, I replied and meant it. The days following the rogue attack shifted something fundamental in the pack's perception of me. I hadn't fought well. Hadn't fought at all, really. I'd just gotten knocked down and needed rescuing. But I'd stepped between danger and a packmate without hesitation, and apparently that mattered more than combat skills. Briar hugged me so tight the next morning that my bruised ribs screamed, tears streaming down her face. You saved my life. I won't forget that. Ever. Others came forward too, Thomas and Maria bringing healing salves, the librarian offering books on lichen history and battle tactics. Even some of the warriors who'd been skeptical before stopped by to nod respectfully. Takes courage to face down a rogue with no training, one told me. Stupid courage, maybe, but courage nonetheless. Kyle remained hostile, but his support had dwindled. Most of the pack had chosen sides, and increasingly they were choosing mine. Theron became more openly affectionate, holding my hand during pack meals, keeping me close during meetings, stealing kisses when he thought no one was watching. They always were, and Jackson always made exaggerated gagging sounds that made me laugh despite myself. The careful distance we'd maintained those first weeks dissolved into partnership that felt natural. Right. Inevitable. But something else was building too. A tension I couldn't name, a prickle at the base of my skull that wouldn't go away. The same feeling I'd had before the rogue attack, only stronger now. More insistent. 5 weeks after the chapel, I found it. I'd been unable to sleep, restless with that nameless anxiety, and had gone for a walk through the compound. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in silver light, and I'd wandered farther than I intended, down past the training grounds, into the forest edge, where the old trails began. That's when I heard voices, low, urgent, speaking in tones meant to be private. I should have turned back, should have given whoever it was their privacy. But something made me creep closer, staying downwind, moving with the quiet I'd learned from years of arriving at the bakery before dawn, without waking the neighbors above. Two figures stood in a small clearing. One I recognized immediately, Kale, his blonde hair catching moonlight. The other was unfamiliar. Older, maybe 50, with a build that spoke of serious power and scars that suggested serious violence. And suddenly, inexplicably, I could feel it. Not just hear their words, but feel their intent. Malice, conspiracy, betrayal. The emotions hit me like a wave so strong it took my breath away. Can't wait much longer, the stranger was saying, his voice rough like gravel. Silvercrest's already suspicious after the rogue attack failed. My blood went cold. It wasn't supposed to fail, Kale said, and there was frustration radiating from him that I could taste. Your rogues were supposed to breach the house, grab the girl? The girl's tougher than you said, and Silvercrest. The stranger shook his head, and I felt his grudging respect mixed with hatred. Magnus underestimated him. Magnus. The name hit me like a fist. I'd heard it before, whispered in conversations between Theron and Evander, always with a weight that suggested danger. Tell Ravencroft the next attempt needs to be clean, Kale continued. No more rogues. A proper strike team. And it needs to happen before the bonding ceremony or we lose our leverage. He knows, the stranger said. 3 days. He's bringing 150 forces. This time we take the territory and the empath. Silvercrest can watch both burn. Empath. The word echoed in my skull, foreign and terrifying, and somehow familiar. Like something I should understand, but didn't. And yet, wasn't that what I'd just done? Felt their emotions from 20 yards away. They were planning an attack. Kale was a traitor, working with this Magnus Ravencroft to what? Take me, kill Theron. Destroy everything I needed to get back. Needed to warn. A twig snapped under my foot. Both men's heads whipped toward my hiding spot, and I saw the moment recognition flared in Kale's gray eyes. Shit, he snarled, already moving. The Luna, I ran. Crashed through underbrush, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Behind me I could hear them giving. Chase could hear Kale's curse, and the strangers shouted orders, could feel their murderous intent like knives against my spine. I wasn't fast enough. Wasn't trained for this. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, and they were gaining Theron. I screamed it with everything I had, not caring if it gave away my position, just needing him to hear. Theron, help. A hand caught my jacket, yanking me backward. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from my lungs, and then Kale was standing over me with murder in his eyes. Should have stayed in your room, Baker, he said, pulling a knife. Then the forest exploded. Theron came out of the darkness like vengeance itself, still in human form, but moving with inhuman speed. He hit Kale with enough force to send them both flying, and suddenly they were a tangle of violent fists and claws, and the wet sound of flesh tearing. The stranger tried to run, but Evander materialized from the shadows, tackling him to the ground. More pack members arrived, Jackson Isolde warriors I didn't know. Wool drawn by my scream. Within minutes, both traitors were subdued, bleeding, Kale's knife lying useless in the dirt. Theron stood over him, breathing hard, his knuckles split and bleeding. Give me one reason, he said. Voice arctic, why I shouldn't kill you right now. Kale spat blood. Because I'm not the threat, Silvercrest. Magnus Ravencroft is. And he's coming for what you stole. I stole nothing. Didn't you? Kale's laugh was bitter. You took the Ashen Lake girl, the last of her bloodline, the only living empath strong enough to... Enough, Theron said, but I was already stepping forward, my mind reeling. What does he mean? I looked between Theron and Kyle, that word echoing again. Empath. What bloodline? What did you steal? Theron's expression shuddered. Coralie, tell me, I demanded. Now. He led me back to the main house, to his private study I'd never been invited into. Evander came too, and Isolde, and they watched as Theron pulled out ancient pack records, leather-bound books with pages yellowed by time. 24 years ago, he began spreading the documents across his desk. An alpha couple was assassinated in southern Oregon. They'd been investigating a criminal network, wolves trafficking cubs, selling them to the highest bidder. They got too close to the truth. He pointed to names on the page, and my breath caught. Donovan and Iris Ashenlake, my parents. Your parents weren't killed in a car accident, Theron said gently. They were murdered by Magnus Ravencroft, the crime lord who ran the trafficking network. He's been hunting your family's bloodline ever since, trying to erase it completely. Why? My voice came out, barely a whisper. We're nobody. Just no. He pulled out another document, older, written in careful script. The Ashen Lake bloodline carries something rare. Something that appears once in a generation, if that. Your mother had it, and you, he met my eyes, you inherited it. Inherited what? Empathic ability, Evander said quietly. The power to sense emotions, intent, even thoughts, if the gift is strong enough. In the right hands, it's the most powerful tactical advantage in existence. You can sense ambushes, detect lies, turn enemies by projecting emotions into their minds. My mind reeled back through the past weeks, the way I'd felt Mrs. Fletcher's fear in the chapel, the way I'd known Kale was hiding something dangerous, the way I'd sensed the rogue's intent to kill before they had even attacked, the way I just felt the conspiracy from 20 yards away. That's why the rogue attack targeted you specifically, Theron said. Magnus wants to either control you or kill you. Your gift threatens his entire operation. An empath can sense his trafficking, victim's fear, track his movements, expose his network. And you knew, I said slowly, you knew all of this. When you claimed me in that chapel, I suspected, he admitted. I'd been tracking the Ashen Lake bloodline for months, trying to find out if any descendants survived. When I heard about your engagement, I investigated, found old records suggesting you might have inherited the gift. And when I saw how Desmond's mother reacted to you, he shook his head. She was terrified. I didn't know why until later. Magnus had paid her to keep you isolated, weakened, convinced you were nothing special. So you claimed me too. What? Use me, protect me both. To keep you alive, he said simply, and to stop a monster from getting his hands on a weapon he'd used to hurt more children. The honesty of it washed over me. He hadn't claimed me because I was special or beautiful or powerful. He'd claimed me because I was the last piece on a chessboard, and leaving me there meant letting evil win. Magnus is coming, Kale had said. 3 days. I looked at Theron, at Evander, at Isolde, who was watching me with something almost like respect now. Then we prepare, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. If I have this gift, this empathic ability, then I need to learn how to use it. Fast. Theron's expression shifted into something fierce and proud. We have someone who can help, an elder who knew your mother. She's been waiting years for you to come home. Her name was Linnea, and she was ancient 70 if she was a day, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to look straight through you into something deeper. You have your mother's face, she said when Theron brought me to her cottage on the edge of the territory. And her gift, though yours, has been dormant, suppressed by trauma and isolation and being told you were nothing special. Can you teach me to control it? I asked. In 3 days, I can teach you to survive it, she corrected. Your mother trained for years, but you have something she didn't: desperation and love worth fighting for. The training was brutal, not physically but mentally, learning to open myself to the flood of emotions that I'd been unconsciously blocking my entire life, learning to distinguish between my feelings and others, learning to project calm or fear into nearby minds, learning that the weakness everyone had always seen in me, my gentleness, my empathy, my tendency to feel too much, was actually the rarest and most powerful gift in the wolf world. Your mother used it to prevent wars, Linnea said on the second day after I'd successfully projected calm into a room full of anxious pack members. She'd sense when violence was about to erupt and diffuse it before blood was shed. That's why Magnus killed her. She exposed his operation, turned his own people against him by making them feel the pain of their victims. On the third day, as the sun began to set, scouts reported movement on the southern border. 150 forces, just like Kyle had said, led by Magnus Ravencroft himself. The final battle was here. The War Council met in the Great Hall. Theron, Evander, Isolde Jackson, and now me. not as decoration or obligation, but as a tactical asset. We're outnumbered 2-1, Evander said, studying maps of the territory, even with defensive advantages. We don't defend, I interrupted, and everyone turned to look at me. That's what he expects. We attack first. Theron's gaze sharpened. Explain. Magnus wants me alive, Kale confirmed that, which means his forces have orders not to kill me, which gives us an advantage. I pointed to the map to the marked location of Magnus's camp. We split into 2 teams. Theron leads the main assault on his position. I lead a smaller team to the detention area where he's holding trafficked cubs. Absolutely not. Theron started, but I cut him off. He's been trafficking for decades. That's his leverage hostages victims. He'll kill if we don't surrender. But if we free them first, we remove his advantage and his motivation. Plus, I met his eyes. An empath in a room full of scared children, I can calm them. Get them out safely while you keep Magnus busy. It's too dangerous, he said flatly. Everything's dangerous, I countered. But this is what my parents died for. This is what my mother would have done. And I'm not going to let more children suffer because I was too afraid to act. Evander looked at me with something like awe. It could work, if we coordinate timing. No, Theron said, but there was less certainty in his voice. Yes, I said firmly. You told me I belong here, that I have power. Let me use it. Trust me. The silence stretched between us, weighted with everything we'd built over 5 weeks, trust and partnership, and something neither of us had named yet, but both of us felt. Finally, Theron nodded. You take Jackson Breyer and 4 of our best. You stay hidden until we engage. And if anything goes wrong, anything you run. Promise me. I promise, I said, and this time I meant it. We moved under cover of darkness. Theron's team, 40 warriors, approached Magnus's position from the west, making enough noise to draw attention. My team circled south using the forest cover and my empathic sense to avoid patrols. I could feel them out there. Magnus's mercenaries radiating emotions I'd learned to recognize: boredom, greed, anticipation of violence. But beneath it, in a cluster near the eastern edge, I felt something different. Fear. Pure childlike terror. The trafficked cubs. There, I whispered to Jackson, pointing. 20 yards east, maybe 10 of them. We crept closer and my heart broke at what we found. Children youngest, maybe 5 oldest, 12, all locked in cages like animals. Their eyes were wide with fear, their small bodies trembling, and I felt their emotions crash over me like a wave. I knelt before the first cage, meeting a little girl's terrified gaze. Hi, I said softly. My name is Coralie. I'm here to help you. Then I did what Linnea had taught me. Opened myself completely and projected outward, not words, but pure emotion. Safety, warmth, the feeling of being held by someone who would die before letting you be hurt. The sensation of home. The little girl's eyes widened, her terror receding like tide going out. You feel nice, she whispered. That's because you're safe now, I said, and meant it with everything I had. Jackson worked on the locks while I moved from cage to cage, projecting that same overwhelming sense of safety. By the time the last lock clicked open, not one child had cried out or panicked. They followed us in silence, trusting their fear replaced by cautious hope. That's when I felt it. A presence I'd been tracking peripherally, drawing closer with purpose and malice. Magnus Ravencroft. Get them out, I told Jackson urgently. Now. What about you? I'm staying. Someone needs to buy you time. Coralie, go. He went herding the children into the forest with Breyer and the others, and I turned to face the man who'd murdered my parents. He emerged from the shadows like something out of a nightmare. Massive, scarred, with yellow eyes that held no humanity at all. His hair was graying at the temples, and he moved with the confidence of someone who'd never known defeat. The Ashen Lake girl, he said, voice like gravel scraping over steel. You look just like your mother. Same pale hair, same stubborn eyes. He circled me slowly, predatory. She died hard. Took 3 of my best wolves to bring her down. Your father lasted longer, kept fighting even with his throat torn out, trying to protect her. Rage built in my chest, hot and pure. You're done, I said. We freed the children. Your leverage is gone. You think that matters? He laughed, and it was the sound of rocks falling. I've built a network that spans 5 states. I have buyers lined up for years. Those cubs were just inventory. I'll get more. Not if I stop you. He stepped closer and I held my ground, despite every instinct screaming to run. You're an untrained empath who's had, 3 days with an elder. Your mother trained for decades and I still killed her. What makes you think you're any different? Because I said, and I could feel my gift building inside me like pressure before a storm. She was alone, and I'm not. Then I let it loose. Everything Linnea had taught me, everything I'd learned from 5 weeks of feeling too much, caring too deeply, letting the world's emotions crash over me like waves. I took all of that sensitivity and all of that empathy and turned it into a weapon. I projected into Magnus's mind, but not fear, not pain, something worse. Guilt. Every child he'd stolen, every family he'd destroyed, every life he'd ruined. I made him feel it all at once, the terror of parents searching for missing cubs, the despair of children locked in darkness, the agony of bonds broken by his greed. The guilt hit him in waves. First, the faces of the children, hundreds of them, maybe thousands over the decades. Each one with parents who'd searched desperately, who'd never stopped hoping, who'd died not knowing what happened to their cubs. Then the families he'd destroyed, the packs torn apart, the bonds severed by his greed, leaving wounds that would never heal. I showed him my mother's gift being used not for violence, but for healing, for turning enemies into friends, for building peace where others saw only war. I made him feel her love for my father, for me, for every wolf she'd ever helped. And then I showed him her final moments. The terror as Magnus's wolves closed in, the desperate hope that I would survive, the willingness to die if it meant keeping me safe. I showed him my parents' last thoughts, made him experience their love, their fear, their sacrifice, made him understand exactly what he'd taken from the world when he killed them. And I asked him, no, forced him to answer. Was it worth it, all those children, all that suffering? For what money, power? What did it buy you that was worth this? Magnus fell to his knees, hands clutching his head, a sound tearing from his throat that wasn't quite human. Stop, he gasped, and there were tears streaming down his scarred face. I can't, I see them all. Every face, every child. The guilt wouldn't fade. I'd made sure of that, burning it into his psyche like a brand. He'd live with it forever, awake and asleep every moment, a reminder of what he'd done. Good, I said, my voice cold as winter. Remember them, every single one, for the rest of your miserable life. That's when Theron arrived, 40 warriors at his back. They'd defeated Magnus's forces with minimal casualties, turned half of them actually when those mercenaries felt the fear of their victims through my empathic projection that I'd been broadcasting across the entire battlefield. Theron looked at Magnus on his knees, looked at me standing over him, and something fierce and proud flashed in those pale eyes. It's over, I told Magnus. You'll stand trial, face every family you destroyed, and you'll spend the rest of your life remembering what you've done. They took him away, took Kyle too, who'd been captured trying to flee during the battle. The pack dealt with traitors according to ancient law. Kyle was executed at dawn, but Magnus would live with his guilt in a cell for decades. I'd made sure his empathic punishment would last, the guilt branded into his psyche permanently. The rescued children were reunited with their families over the following weeks. 10 cubs that night, but Magnus's records revealed locations of dozens more. Regional alpha councils came together, forming task forces to dismantle what remained of his network, and they asked me to lead it. The Anti-Trafficking Alliance, the Western Council Alpha said, presenting me with formal documents 2 weeks after the battle. Cross-pack cooperation, empathic screening at borders, a permanent solution to a problem that's plagued us for generations. He looked at me with respect that made my chest tight. Your mother started this work. Will you finish it? I looked at Theron, who stood beside me with quiet pride radiating from every line of his body. He nodded once. Your choice. Yes, I said, I'll do it. And through it all, Theron stood beside me. Partner, mate, king to my queen. The bonding ceremony took place under the full moon 6 weeks after a chapel rejection that felt like a lifetime ago. 150 pack members gathered to witness. Not hostile now, not suspicious. They'd seen me prove myself not through violence, but through courage and compassion and a gift that had saved their pack. Theron and I stood before the assembled crowd, before Evander and Isolde and Jackson and all the people who'd become family, before Linnea, who smiled with tears in her eyes, before Thomas and Maria and Briar and everyone who'd given a strange baker girl a chance. The ceremony was ancient, conducted in the old tongue by Linnea. Blood binding, public vows, the exchange of marks that would identify us as bonded mates to any wolf who saw us. I was told I was too weak, I said when it came time for personal vows, my voice carrying across the clearing. Too soft, not strong enough for this world. I looked at Theron, at those mercury eyes reflecting moonlight. But I learned that strength comes in many forms. My parents taught me that fought for it, died for it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life honoring their legacy, protecting those who can't protect themselves, using empathy as power, not weakness. I turned to the pack. Some of you doubted me. That was fair. I doubted myself. But you gave me time to prove that gentleness and strength aren't opposites. That compassion can win battles violence never could. That being soft doesn't mean being breakable. Theron took my hands, and the mate bond completed, an invisible thread pulling taut between us, connecting us in ways that went beyond words. I felt his love crash over me, like a wave felt his pride, and his fierce protectiveness, and his wonder that he'd found me at all. And I sent back everything I felt. Gratitude, trust, love so deep it ached. You're my mate, he said, voice rough with emotion. My queen, my heart. And you're mine, I replied, the hand I took when I needed saving, the man who saw worth when everyone else saw weakness. The pack howled approval, the sound rising into the mountain night, and I knew I was home. Finally, truly home. Isolde approached me after the ceremony, her ice blue eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. I owed you an apology weeks ago, she said quietly. I was wrong about you. You're not just what he needed. You're what this pack needed. What all of us needed. Thank you, I said and meant it. Your mother would be proud, she added. Iris Ashenlake was my friend before Magnus. I didn't know her daughter survived, but I see her in you. The same gift, the same heart, the same refusal to let darkness win. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You knew her. I was young then, barely 20. But yes, she taught me that power doesn't have to corrupt. That strength can be gentle. Isolde smiled just slightly. She'd be glad you found Theron. She always said the right mate doesn't complete you. They help you become who you were always meant to be. 1 year later, I stood in the clearing where we'd bonded, heavily pregnant, watching the mountains turn gold with sunrise. Theron came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my swollen belly, and our daughter kicked against his palm. What should we name her? He asked. Iris, I said immediately. After my mother, so she knows where she came from, what she's capable of. Iris Silvercrest. He tested, voice full of wonder. Our daughter, the next generation. I thought about the girl I'd been standing in a chapel in a dress meant for someone else, hearing that she wasn't enough. I thought about the journey from there to here, every painful step, every moment of doubt, every small victory that led to this. She'll be strong, I said, gentle and fierce, empathic like her grandmother, protective like her father. And she'll know always that she's enough exactly as she is. Theron pressed a kiss to my temple, just like her mother. Below us, the pack was stirring. The bakehouse I'd reopened, now run by 3 pack members I'd trained. The training center where young wolves learned both combat and empathy. The Alliance headquarters where we coordinated anti-trafficking efforts across 5 states, all of it visible from our mountaintop home. All of it proof that rejection wasn't the end, that being deemed insufficient by the wrong people didn't define your worth, that sometimes the worst moments led to the best destinations. The Anti-Trafficking Alliance had saved 217 cubs in its first year, dismantled 3 more networks, brought 15 traffickers to justice. And it was only beginning. Regional packs that had been rivals for generations now worked together, united by a common cause. Borders that had been closed opened for cooperative patrols. Young empaths who'd hidden their gifts in fear now trained openly, learning to use their abilities to protect rather than to merely survive. My mother's dream realized, my father's sacrifice honored, and I'd done it not by being someone I wasn't, but by embracing exactly who I was. The council wants you to speak at the summit next month, Theron said, pulling me back to the present. All the Western territories. They're calling you the empath queen. I laughed. I'm just a baker who learned to feel things. You're the woman who brought down Magnus Ravencroft without shedding blood, he corrected. Who turned his own army against him with nothing but empathy. Who saved 200 children and built an alliance that's changing how packs operate across the continent. He turned me to face him. You're extraordinary, Coralie, and it's time you stop being surprised when people recognize it. I'm still getting used to it, I admitted. Some mornings I wake up and think I'm still in that apartment above the bakery, trying to convince myself Desmond was a good choice. And then I feel you beside me. Feel this. I placed his hand on my belly where Iris was kicking. Feel the pack bond solid and real. And I remember this is real. This is my life. I chose it, and it chose me back. Iris was born on a cool autumn evening with the pack gathered outside the healing center, sending strength through the bonds we all shared. She came into the world with a cry that sounded like a howl, her eyes the same mercury silver as her father's, her hair as pale as mine. When Linnea placed her in my arms, I felt that flutter of empathic gift, faint but unmistakable. She'd inherited it just as I had, just as my mother had. She'll be powerful, Linnea said softly, but you'll teach her. Show her that power is a responsibility, not a weapon. Theron sat beside me on the bed, his large hand cradling Iris's tiny head. Our daughter, he said, voice thick. She's perfect. She's ours, I agreed. And she'll grow up knowing that being gentle is a strength. That feeling deeply is a gift. That compassion can change the world. Over the following months, life settled into a rhythm that felt like the answer to questions I hadn't known how to ask. I split my time between motherhood, running the alliance, and still always baking. The bakehouse had become a gathering place somewhere pack members came not just for bread, but for community, for the feeling of safety that radiated from me even when I wasn't trying. Iris grew fast, as lichen children did. By 6 months, she was toddling around the compound following Briar like a tiny shadow. By a year, she could shift into a tiny silver wolf that made the entire pack melt. And her empathic gift developed too. She'd cry when other children were upset, giggle when the pack felt joy, curl into my arms when she sensed tension, needing the comfort only I could provide. She'll need careful training, Linnea told me when Iris was 18 months old. The gift can overwhelm if she doesn't learn control. But she has you. That's more than your mother had, more than most young empaths ever get. I held my daughter close, feeling her small heartbeat against my chest. I won't let her think she's broken, I promised. Won't let anyone make her feel like her sensitivity is weakness. No, Linnea agreed, smiling. You'll teach her, it's her greatest strength. 2 years after the chapel rejection, the Western Territory Summit gathered in Silvercrest lands. 15 packs, over 1,000 wolves, all coming together to formalize the alliance I'd built. I stood before them in the Great Hall, no longer the terrified girl who'd been rejected at an altar, but a Luna who'd earned her place through courage and compassion and an unwavering commitment to protecting the vulnerable. My mother, Iris Ashenlake, believed that empathy could prevent wars, I told the assembled alphas. That understanding could build bridges where violence only created chasms. She died for that belief, killed by a monster who feared what she represented. I paused, letting the words settle. I've spent 2 years proving she was right. The Anti-Trafficking Alliance has saved over 400 children. We've dismantled 7 trafficking networks. We've brought 32 criminals to justice. And we've done it through cooperation, through sharing information, through choosing unity over isolation. I looked out at faces that ranged from supportive to skeptical to openly curious. Some of you still question whether an empath should lead this alliance, whether someone who feels too much can make the hard calls. I smiled just slightly. But feeling deeply doesn't mean thinking softly. Compassion doesn't mean weakness. And empathy, real empathy, means understanding your enemies well enough to defeat them without becoming them. The applause started slowly, then built. Not everyone there were still alphas who believed strength meant only physical power. But enough, more than enough. The alliance was ratified, the treaty signed, and the Western Territories entered a new era of cooperation built on the foundation my mother had dreamed of and I had made real. That night, after the ceremonies and celebrations had ended, I stood with Theron on our balcony, watching the visiting packs prepare to depart at dawn. "Your mother would be proud," he said, echoing Isolde's words from 2 years before. "I hope so," I replied. "I hope she knows I finished what she started, that her death wasn't for nothing." "It wasn't." He pulled me close and I leaned into his warmth. "You've built something that will last generations, changed how packs interact, saved hundreds of lives, and all because you refused to let rejection define you." I thought about that chapel, about Desmond's words that had cut so deep, about the girl who'd stood there in a dress meant for someone else, wondering if she'd ever be enough. Sometimes I'm grateful he rejected me. I admit, if he hadn't, I'd never have found this, never have discovered what I was capable of, never have met you. "Fate has a strange sense of humor," Theron agreed, "but I'm grateful too, every day. Even when I wake you at 3 a.m. because I sensed a disturbance in the pack bonds and had to check on everyone, especially then." He kissed the top of my head. "Though maybe we could work on the definition of emergency." I laughed, the sound carrying across the mountain night. Below us, Iris was sleeping peacefully in her nursery, watched over by Briar, who'd become her devoted guardian. Around us, the pack slept safe and secure. Beyond us, an alliance of packs worked together to protect the innocent. And in my chest, where shame and doubt had once lived, there was only certainty. I was Coralie Silvercrest, Luna of the Northern Territories, leader of the Anti-Trafficking Alliance, mother to Iris, mate to Theron. But more than any title, I was myself. The gentle baker who'd learned her gentleness was power. The empath who'd turned feeling too much into feeling exactly enough. The woman who'd been rejected at an altar and had taken that rejection as an opportunity to find where she truly belonged. "Ready for bed?" Theron asked, his hand warm on my back. "In a minute," I said, wanting to hold on to this moment just a little longer. This peace, this certainty, this sense of having finally completely come home. The mountains stood eternal around us, silver with moonlight. The pack bonds hummed with contentment. And somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, not in challenge or warning, but in pure joy at being alive. I howled back, letting my voice join the mountain choruses, and Theron joined me. Our song rose into the night, a declaration and a promise and a celebration all at once. We were Silvercrest. We were pack. We were home. And we were exactly enough.